Well, I never know what I'm supposed to talk about until I get there a lot of times because there's so much information. I go according to whatever they've been publicizing or what they want me to speak on. But with 15 books, I can talk about just anything that you want to talk about because they're on all phases of metaphysics. Just everything. See, because, I'm not a psychic, I'm not a channeler. I consider myself the reporter, the researcher, and the investigator of lost knowledge because I soon found out in my work that what I was getting was information that was either forgotten, lost, or never known. And that's what I'm doing is getting back this information to our time. Now, is there anybody here that is not familiar with my books? Just a few. Okay. Because most of the time people come, I've been doing this 40 years. So most of them are familiar with the work. It's funny, I just got back from Europe. I spoke in London and in France. And I have my classes now all over the world. And people were coming, not from those countries, but from all over Europe. Yeah, let's turn the cell phones off. Is that okay? We did without cell phones for many, many years. Because we can, we never had phones we carried around with us, so we can do without them for a little while. But anyway, when I was over there, the people coming to the classes were coming from all over Europe. And a lot of them were saying, I just discovered you. I said, that's funny. I've been around for 40 years doing this work. My books have been out for over 20 years, and they're just now finding me. I think it's the internet generation is where it's coming from. Because they're saying I'm all over YouTube, and now it's Facebook. I haven't even looked on Facebook. But it's all like it's all of a sudden new to everybody, but we've been doing it for a long time. So some of them are still saying, I just found you. Okay, for those that don't know what I do, I am a hypnotist, but it's a past life therapy is what I do. I've been doing hypnosis for over 40 years, so it's a long time. That's why I said they're just now discovering me. But I started out in the 1960s when there wasn't any of this. There was no New Age. People didn't talk about reincarnation. They didn't know what it was in this part of the world. They didn't know about past lives. It just was something that was just not out there. So that's how long I've been doing it. So when I got into this, I was doing hypnosis in those days. It was just done for habits. Stop smoking, lose weight. That's in the very beginning. You wouldn't have used it for anything like this at all. So I began that long ago, and we stumbled into reincarnation by accident, if anything is ever an accident. But in the days when nobody knew any of this, because the only book out at that time was The Search for Bridie Murphy. That book wouldn't even be published today. It's too simple. It's too ordinary. But that was all there was. There was no books to tell a hypnotist what to do if you were to suddenly go into a past life, because it just didn't happen. But that's what happened to me back in the 60s. My husband and I were stationed on a Navy base. He was Navy for 21 years. I'm not going to go too much into my background because there's other things to cover. But we were stationed on a Navy base in Texas. And the doctor on the base said he wanted to know if we would work with one of his patients. She was very overweight and having a lot of problems with her kidneys, and it was what they called nervous eating. He said if we could just get her to relax, that's all he wanted us to do. So that began everything. In the course of getting her to relax, she went into a past life and not knowing what in the world was going on. But I'm so curious that I wanted to keep exploring it and finding out about it. So we ended up taking her through 5 different lifetimes back to where she was created by God. Now you can imagine for a church-going people in that part of the world, none of this it just was totally unheard of. And the people in the base found out what we were doing, and they were coming to our house to listen to the latest chapter in their bed. It was all being recorded on the portable tape recorder of the day. Those big reel-to-reels, if you remember those, that's what we were doing it on. It was hardly portable. You could hardly lift the thing. So people were coming to our house to listen to it. We were keeping the woman anonymous. But they still, this was blowing them away. Past lives? What are you talking about? But it was so fascinating that instead of being frightened by it, we just had so much curiosity we wanted to keep on working with it. Now, the book Five Lives Remembers tells the whole story of how it all happened. But in the course of this, my husband was almost killed. He had made it through Vietnam fine. He was 21 years in the Navy. And he made it through Vietnam, no problems. He comes back to the States, and we're living in Texas, and he was almost killed by a drunken officer going to the base one night. His body was completely crushed. They said there was no way he could possibly live through the whole ordeal. Lost all the blood in his body, everything. It was a really bad experience. But he was in a body cast for 8 months in a hospital. He couldn't move for 8 months. And I used to wonder, what would that be like to not even be able to move all that time? But for a long time, they thought he could die. He was going to die. But he finally pulled through. But the interesting thing about it was that the people on the base that knew what we were experimenting with were saying, this is your punishment. This is God punishing you. Reincarnation, peeking around hidden corners, work of the devil. And so they thought that's what they were talking about. God is punishing you for doing these things. I knew God wouldn't punish people just for wanting to know more, to learn more, because the God that we discovered in those early days was a God full of love. I knew he wouldn't punish anyone for wanting to ask questions and wanting to get information. But anyway, it was a very bad time, and my husband was finally put out of the Navy as a disabled veteran, and we moved to Arkansas. We had to go somewhere with a big family and no money, so that's why I ended up here. I just live down the road from here. This is very close for me. Just 25 miles. I live on a mountaintop just like this. We have the woods around us, and we moved there mostly because we had to be somewhere where we could raise a family on nothing. So, we did all the, the gardens and all of that stuff. I've been there, done that. And now I'm glad we have it, because now I travel all over the world, and I'm around all that energy of the cities and the people. And I'm so glad when I can come home, get back here to the hills where it's peaceful and it's quiet. And in Huntsville, nobody knows what I do and nobody cares. That way I can live in two worlds. This is my retreat. This is where I come to recharge my battery. And I really need that. Because we go up, we're a mile to our nearest neighbor. So I'm up there in the hills with the holy woods around, and I really need that solitude. Of course, I have an office in Huntsville where clients come to see me. But otherwise, nobody in town really knows what I do. You can get into this field of metaphysics and this kind of work, and you can go overboard in it very easily. It's very easy for you to do. I've seen other speakers do that. They go off the deep end. That's not the wisest thing to do. It's better if you can have a balance. So in all these years, I've traveled all over the world doing conferences. There was a while I was doing a conference every week, traveling continually. And when you're doing all of that, I can come home, and there nobody knows what I'm doing, and I can live in two worlds. It's very important for me. I have to have that balance. Then I can go out again. We just returned from Europe. Next week or so, we're going to be headed out on our biggest trip this year. Every year I go to Australia. We'll be back until Thanksgiving. We'll be gone to Singapore. I have to speak there, and then I'm going to be doing six cities in Australia, doing a lot of my classes now all over the world, and then we'll be in New Zealand, so we'll be back here at Thanksgiving. That's why it's so hard to get appointments with me, because it has to be booked around my travels. We have as long as a year waiting list. That's why I'm teaching my technique. Because in the beginning, remember, I had no instructions in this. There was nothing out there. So I had to develop my own way of doing hypnosis. And along the 40 years, I have discovered a wonderful power that I work with. And I found a way to contact it. And it's the source of all knowledge. And it is so fantastic what I work with. That the information that comes, this is where all my books have come from. And we found a way to have instant healing in one session. So I was able to perfect this technique over the last 30 years and to get it to where it works. And then I wasn't sure if I could teach it, because how are you going to teach something if you've developed it yourself? But 8 years ago, I decided to start teaching it because there were just too many people wanting sessions. So now we have classes everywhere, all over the world. I was in Russia 4 times last year. There, doctors and scientists are taking it. Psychiatrists are taking it. They're saying it's the therapy of the future, because we have found how to contact something that's very, very important. So now that's a lot of my work is passing the information along with the classes. But I'm also still writing more and more books. The information pours out of the people that I work with. It doesn't come from me. It comes from the people that I work with. I'm the reporter, remember. I just put it together and accumulate it. And it doesn't all come from one person. I work with thousands and thousands of people. And I'll get a piece of information from one person and a piece of information from somebody else. And it's my job to put it all together like a puzzle. And that's where the Convoluted Universe books are coming from, is the pieces that I get from different ones. Because it's amazing the way the information comes in. But those of you who read my books know what I'm talking about, this power. Let me explain it to the ones that don't know. This is what I work with in my sessions, and I found a way to contact the source of all knowledge. Okay, I call this the subconscious, but it's not the subconscious the way it's defined by the psychiatrists. That's a childish part of your mind. That's the part of your mind that you use when you're doing habits. Stop smoking, lose weight. The hypnotist uses the childish part of the mind, the simple part. The part that I call the subconscious, you may say it is the oversoul, the higher self, the higher consciousness. It is so big and so huge, it has all knowledge, and it has all of the answers. And all power is there, and that's where we have the instant healings, because they are the ones that are doing it. I'm not doing the healing. I just found a way to contact them and allow them to come through the client, and I'm just a facilitator. But the miracles I've seen are tremendous. And my teaching now, we're finding the students are also having the same miracles. We have huge classes in Australia. I had one over there about a year ago. We had 91 students in the Australian class in Perth. They're doing this, and they're also reporting miracles. So to me, it shows it is a way of spreading this, and this is what my job is. But a little difficult for some people to understand how you can communicate with something like this. But it is so big and so huge, but yet it cares about every single person. Sometimes people ask about God. This is not God, but it's just below. It's just in that little band, just below God. You can't really go any higher to communicate. But it cares about every single person and is so full of love that when I work with it, I love working in that energy because it is so fantastic. And it really wants to help everyone that I work with. And I trust it totally. So what began to happen was the information began coming out. My job is mostly the therapy. I'm a therapist and I'm a counselor. I have to listen to everybody's problems. And everybody has problems. They come from all over the world now to have sessions. People are complicated. Everybody's got something that they're worried about. So it's my job to help them to discover what they're looking for and to help them to find the answers. So that's my main concern is the therapy. But I found when I was communicating and doing the sessions, say for instance, I'm doing a session in England. They never interfere with the session. They are helping the person, but toward the end of the session, sometimes they'll come through and they'll say, Dolores, this is the next piece of information you need for your next book. And they'll give me a theory or a concept that I've never heard before. Then they will continue with the work with the client. Then maybe a week later, I'm back in the States working with somebody totally different. It'll happen again. They'll come through again and they will expand on the information they've just given me. And this is what I mean about I got to put it together like a puzzle, a piece here and a piece there. And how can this be by chance if I'm getting the same information through many, many people? It's repeated again and again and again. That has to give it validity because they don't know what I'm looking for. They don't know what I've found. And I'm constantly being given theories now that I've never, ever heard of before because they say it's time now for this to come out to the world. I work a lot with the Swamis and the ashrams, with the Sivananda group in particular. Their headquarters are in Canada. So I go to their ashrams all over the world. That's another thing I do. I'm always speaking somewhere. But when I talk to the Swamis, I'm very respectful of people's beliefs. And I wanted to know, is there anything that I'm going to say that may offend you in any way? They say, no, you can say anything you want. They say, what you think you're getting is new is actually very, very old, very, very ancient information. All we're doing is getting back the old knowledge that was known thousands of years ago. But in those days, it was only taught in the secret schools, the secret mystery schools, because the average person could not have understood it. And, there were the Essenes, there were the Cathars, there were, back in the days of the oracles and the Greek, and see, I've had many, many people go back to these times when they had the knowledge, they had the information in those days. But they kept to themselves because this was sacred information. The average person, they wouldn't have understood it. They couldn't have. This is way one of my books on Jesus even. He talked in parables because the average person couldn't understand what he was trying to tell them. He had to do it in analogies and examples. And that was the way it was done for thousands and thousands of years. The schools that had the secret knowledge held on to that very tightly. And then down through history, there have always been groups that have tried to get that knowledge, and they would have used it in the wrong way. And many of these people were killed, and they would die rather than give up the information. So what I've been told now, it's this information is what's coming back. And it's being released now to our time for the average person. Imagine how powerful that is. Before it was only for the few who could understand it. Now they think we're at the point when we can all understand it and we can benefit from it. And that's why the information that I'm getting now is getting more and more complicated and going into deeper and deeper concepts. That's why I began writing the Convoluted Universe series, because every book I keep thinking I've heard it all. Now there can't be anything else to find. And then they come up with another theory and another concept that I hadn't heard of before. At the end of Convoluted 3, I finally said, I don't think there's anything left that you can surprise me with. You already told me everything. They said, oh, no. There's more. There's a lot more. My daughter says, we've opened the crack about this much. We're just beginning to peek through. But now it's like our minds are ready to handle these things. Before we couldn't have. Now it's time for us to go into this part. The lecture tour we just did, we went all over the whole United States in July. And we didn't come home. We went from city to city to city all through July. And we called it the Awakening Tour. And that's what it's all about, waking up. The veil is thinning. We're beginning to open up to these things, where before we couldn't have understood it. Now we're beginning to. And today is a very important day, 10-10-10. When I got up this morning, I felt a tremendous energy, and usually I'm not sensitive to that. My daughter is, the one that's with me, but I couldn't figure out what it was, and she said she thinks this is, as I go through this lecture, I'm going to be explaining what's happening in our lives right now. The average person may not be aware of it, but there's big, important things that are happening in your life. And it's like the energy now has just been kicked up a notch. It's just been raised another level. Those of you who are sensitive probably were picking up on it today. You said when you had your ceremonies out there, they said there was a lot of energy. More people are becoming aware of that than ever before. But the average person is not going to understand because they won't be aware. They may know they feel something, but they're not going to know what it is. That's why we're in this point where we can understand what is happening right now. Now, I've written so many books, and sometimes I do one lecture just on one subject because there's so many different things. But what I've been doing lately on the Awakening Tour, and I just did it in London, we had over 200 people in London, is we're focusing on the shift that is happening right now, if you want to call it that. It's the vibrations and the frequencies that are changing in our own bodies as well as the whole earth itself. And everybody wants to know about this, and this is becoming very important. I used to think maybe people couldn't understand this, but now it's becoming more and more aware because the door is cracking open. We're beginning to peek through it. Okay, because I could talk about life after death. I have all the information on that, what happens when you die, where you go afterwards. I have books on Jesus, the missing years, the stories that are not in the Bible. I have 4 books on the UFOs and the ETs because I spent 25 years working on that. But things are changing. That was in the beginning of my work. I was doing those, and I thought that was fantastic. But now it's changing what I'm getting. I said there's a lot of times I wish I could go back to those days when it was simpler. But I don't think it's ever going to happen that way again. But I spent 25 years researching the UFOs and the ETs. I've written 4 books on that, and I've spoken at every UFO conference in the world. And the other investigators don't like me because they keep saying, you're not finding the truth. You're not finding the horror and the evil. I said, that's because it does not exist. I have never found any negativity in my work at all, and I'm finding the reasons why all these things are happening. And once you understand it, it makes perfect sense. It's all positive. I'm working on 3 more books right now. There's too much information. It pours out of people. And one of them is going to be Convoluted 4, but I'm getting so much more UFO information, I think it should be a book on that because it's going totally away from what anybody has ever suspected before. I don't think the UFO conferences are ready for it. I don't think they would understand because they're still into this nuts and bolts. If they can't see it, touch it, dissect it, it doesn't exist. That's the way they are. They have to have their scientific things. And I don't think they're going to be able to understand it because you have to be in metaphysics and put all the pieces together. That's why I said I'm getting more and more information. But it's all part of learning what it's all about. Okay, now, the main thing, though, is to focus on what's happening right now. I can talk about the other things. Later, if you have questions about those things, we can answer those. But I think right now we'll focus on what we're going into with the new Earth and the changes that are happening right now, because that's the most important thing. So I always say, in order to understand what is happening now, we have to go all the way back to the beginning, which is a long way back. We have to go all the way back to the beginning of the world, because that's where it all started. And the ETs have been involved with this since the very beginning of the earth. And that's why I have to bring them in, because they're very much a part of what's happening and everything right now. If you understand their part in this, it's beautiful and it's wonderful. And people are afraid of them. They don't understand how important all of this is. But in the very beginning, and I've had people go back to these times in my sessions. This is where I've gotten the information from. When the earth, well, I've had them go back, the earth wasn't even really formed when they were part of helping create the air for the earth. Then they were helping to create the water. And many people, just like you, they go back to lifetimes when they were the creator beings and were there at the beginning of everything, when the water had to be made. Then when the land had to rise, and they had to begin with the simple single-celled organisms. And I've had people there when the first planting of the plants began. And they went back to the lifetimes when all of this was happening. Back at the beginning of the world, when a planet reaches the point that it can support life, this is a very momentous occasion in the history of that planet. There are councils over everything. There's councils over the earth. There's councils over solar systems. There's councils over galaxies. There's councils over universes. Everything has order. It all has rules and regulations, and this is very important to know. Nothing is random. And many of these beings spend their whole lives going throughout space looking for planets that are ready to support life. So whenever the planet reaches that point, when the primeval soup is ready, the chemicals are right in the air and in the earth that they know life can form, that's a very important time in the history of that planet. And then in the council, the planet is given its life charter. This means that you can go ahead and start introducing life. And the first ones that did this, they called them the archaic ones. Very, very ancient beings that went throughout the universes, beginning life everywhere. And I have so many questions. I want to know why them? And they said because that was how life began for them. It's always been introduced somewhere. And so they looked, as their job as they began to go into space, to look for other planets when life can be produced there. And this has been going on since the beginning of time, the universe, it's always the plan. Now people say, well, how does God fit into this? God is very important in it. They call it the source. The source is what tells them where to go and what to do, and they have their instructions. Nothing is random. So they go to a planet and they say, well, okay, it looks like it's getting ready now. We get the atmosphere toned down enough. With Earth, there was too much ammonia in the atmosphere. It had to be cleaned out. It had to get to the point whenever the Earth could support life. And they had a very active part in all of that. So when it finally got to that point, when the primeval soup was ready, then the job was go in and introduce single-celled organisms. See what will grow. They had no idea if anything would grow, but it was very important to get something going there. They said you would be surprised what you could have looked like. Because it all depends on the chemicals, the air, all of the things dealing with that planet, what kind of creatures will be introduced. So they were introducing, now you can imagine how much time this would have taken. But they say there is no such thing as time. Time is an illusion. They said mankind is probably the only species in the universe has found a way to measure something that does not exist. Leave it to us. Okay. So for them, it's been a very short period of time. Even for us, it would have been eons and eons watching all of this happen. So the idea is to introduce a single-celled organism and see if it's going to produce something. They wanted to be able to clump together and make a multi-celled organism. No matter what it's going to be, at least it's life-forming in some way. That is what the whole secret was about. And I asked them in the beginning, where did the cells come from? They said, it doesn't make any difference. They go throughout the universe as collecting cells, collecting specimens to see what will grow somewhere. Then they can manipulate it to see if it will grow. After it begins to form a multi-celled organism, then it can develop into plants, life of some kind. They don't care what it is as long as it begins to develop. And they said many times they would go back to a planet where they had started something, and they found that it had fallen apart, the multi-celled organism, and the planet was lifeless again. They said, you have no idea how fragile life really is. It's very difficult to get life going, and it's very important to get it going. And I asked them one time, well, hasn't life ever begun by itself, just indigenously on a planet? They said it could, but it's very rare. But they said if it did, it wouldn't be organized and it wouldn't have a plan. They said for you to have gotten to the intelligent creature you are now, if it would have happened naturally, it would have taken millions more years than it has now. It has to be organized and planned. So some of this may be startling ideas for you, and it was for me in the beginning, as I had to adapt to this way of thinking. But now I've had people go back to lifetimes when they were, ETs is as good a word as any, when they were there, and some of them were called the planters. And they were in charge of planting, getting things going, getting the cells going, getting the plants going. And then there were other beings that people have gone back to lifetimes when they were the recorders, recording what is growing and what's not growing, what do we need to work on. See, this is a very organized plan. So it went along for many, many eons as it began to develop. And then finally you have animals appearing. And a lot of the animals came from other planets because they collect them all over the universe. See what will grow here. And they were watching all of this as it began to evolve. Now we developed along the mammal line. Other planets develop along the reptilian line. Other ones are the insectoid line. And there's some kinds of beings you would not even think it was possible for them to be alive. And I've had them describe many of them to me. But life is life. Life takes every single form you could imagine, and some you can't even possibly imagine. They said one of the most important things I'd be able to teach people was that everything has consciousness. Everything. That microphone's alive, the rug is alive, the floor is alive, the chair is alive, everything has consciousness. And this took a lot. I'm talking about, that's what I say, these are mind-bending concepts. I said my books, The Convoluted Universe, are for those people who want their minds bent like pretzels, because you have to really come at it from a different way of looking at it. But everything is alive. They said in the fibers of the rug are universes. It's all there, from the microcosm to the macrocosm. Everything is there. And we have been in all these places. We have lived lives in all these places. And the stories I write about are amazing because people are going back and remembering these things and coming back now. So you have to open your mind up when you read my books and when you listen to my talk anyway, not to say, oh, it's a bunch of bunk. This is, it's very believable, very possible. Anyway, with Earth, the animals began to develop, and they were here checking on everything. And then they had to get to the point where they could create an intelligent human being. So what they did, they had to figure out what animal will we use that we can genetically manipulate the genes to create an intelligent human being. They chose the ape because it had a large brain capacity and also because of the hands. Had to be able to make tools, to be able to build cities, to create a civilization. So they genetically manipulated the ape to create the first human beings. And I've had many people go back to lifetimes when they were these first beings, and they were mostly animal and human mixed together. So this went on for an enormous amount of time. I'm going to skip a lot of it because I can spend hours just talking about the whole sequence of events that went about. But when the people finally got to the point where we had human beings who could think and they could function, then they began coming and living with the people. They had to give them the next advancements that they needed to know, the next step in their evolution. Every culture in the world has the legend of the culture bringer. The Indians have their corn woman who gave them the corn. You have the other ones where they brought the fire. They had to be taught. No being ever just came out of the jungle and said, I'm going to stop gathering berries and go and plant corn. I'm going to start building houses. It didn't happen that way. These beings came and lived among them and brought them the next advancement they were supposed to have. It was time for them in the next evolution. And because these beings lived as long as they wanted to, they created the legends of the gods in all of these ancient cultures. They were actually these beings living among the people and giving them the information. That's where the gods and the goddesses all came down through. And I've had people go back to those times. And they say, why do they call us gods? We're just beings. We're here to help the people, and it's just that we live longer than the rest of them. So you can see their job was all of this time to watch over us and take care of us. I've had people, in one of my books, they said, why do people say we're here to take over the world? It's ours. It always has been. They said, we can't do anything as bad to you as you do to yourself. They've been taking care of us since the beginning of the world. That's why my one book is called The Keepers of the Garden, because we're the garden, we're the experiment, and we're a grand experiment. They had high hopes for us. Another one of my books was called The Custodians. They're the caretakers, and they've been taking care of us all that time. But while all of this was developing, when it was still not quite in the human stage, something happened that was totally unexpected. Earth was supposed to be a perfect world. Talk about the Garden of Eden, I think it goes back to where that came from. It was supposed to be a perfect world where you would never get sick and never die. It was supposed to be absolutely perfect. They said, give this beautiful, wonderful planet a creature with knowledge and free will and see what he does with it. That's why we're an experiment. Other planets don't have free will. And I've had people go to lifetimes on those kind of planets. But something happened in there because we were supposed to be perfect. During the developmental stages, a meteorite hit the Earth. And when the meteorite hit the Earth, it brought disease for the first time to the Earth. It brought bacteria to the world. Now, I saw it, as a special on Nova several years ago, but they were talking about the types of life on Earth. They said there are two types of life on Earth, bacteria and everything else. Bacteria is the alien, what do you want to call, life form. It was not ever supposed to be here. And that's where disease came from. You know, some bacteria are good, but when that happened, when the meteorite hit the Earth, it brought the bacteria and caused disease. And they said there was great sadness when they discovered this. And they went back to the council and they said, what do we do now? Our wonderful experiment has been ruined. It will never be the perfect beings that we wanted it to be. What do we do? Do we just wipe it all out? Start all over again? or do we allow it to keep on developing the way it was, knowing it will never be the perfect being we wanted it to be? So it was decided, because so much time and effort had been invested in Earth, to allow it to go ahead and develop the way it was, knowing it would never be perfect. And that was what happened. So this is where you have all your UFO stories now. They're still watching over us. They're still taking care of us. They're still trying to get us back to that perfect state that we were supposed to be. They're very concerned about the increase in cancer and about the effect of the pollutants in the air and the additives to our food and what it's doing to the human body. So a lot of the testing is trying to find out, well, how is it affecting the human body? And I could go more and more into all of that too. But they're very concerned about what's happening to the human being as we've gone through this. Okay. So I'm trying to get this in an order in my head. If I forget something, I'll probably come back to it anyway. Okay. Okay. Sometimes I jump around a little. Try to keep it on track. Okay. So, as I said, they said, let's create a human being and give it free will. See what he does with it. And of course, they stand back and shake their heads. Oh my gosh, what are these kids doing? But there is the prime directive, and it's in Star Trek, and it's very, very real. It's not fiction. The prime directive is you cannot interfere with the development of a civilization. That was their prime directive. Give us free will, see what we're going to do with it, but they could not interfere with what we were doing. They could just watch. So I asked them one time, I said, okay, but you're coming, you're giving him these next developments. That's something I forgot to say too. As they're coming and living among them, giving them the next step along. Nowadays, in the last several years, they can't come and live among us anymore. So whenever it's time for the next development in our next invention, whatever it is we're going to have in our timeline, when that happens, the idea is put out into the atmosphere. They don't care who picks it up, as long as it is invented in the timeline. Look at how many people all over the world who are always working on the same invention at the same time. They don't care, and that's why I've talked to people all over the world, in Australia and United States, who are all been working on free energy. They all have the same ideas. And I asked them, should I put these people together? And they said, no, let them develop on their own. But the idea is put out so that its next invention is in our timeline. It will be there now. So that's how they're doing it now. They are sending this out into the cosmos. Okay. So now we get to the point about non-interference. And I asked them, I said, okay, you're coming, you're living among the people, you're giving them the next thing they're supposed to know. You're bringing corn, you're bringing fire. They taught them how to do surgery. And I said, isn't that interference? He said, no, that's a gift we give them at the proper time in their development. What you do with it is your free will. And most of the time, when they give us something, we don't use it in the right way. For instance, when they developed surgery, after a while it got turned into human sacrifice. And look at a lot of the things they've taught us, we've turned it into weapons. We turn it into a negative, and which is not supposed to be. So I said, well, can't you just come back and say you're not doing it right? That's interference. They give it to us. What you do with it is your own free will. And they just got to stand up there and shake their heads and say, well, nothing we can do about it now. It's up to them. They've taken the wrong turn. But you see how this is very important in what's happening right now in our earth. So all these years, they have been watching all of this. taking care of us behind the scenes, not being able to interfere, watching us do all these awful, terrible things we do to the world, and they can't interfere. The only time they can ever step in and stop us is if we got to the point we were going to blow up the world. If we developed to the point that we were going to destroy this earth, they would have to come in and stop us. And they said, well, you wouldn't think this little bitty planet over here in this corner of the solar system would be that important. And we're isolated over here on purpose. We're quarantined from the rest of the universe. They don't want us contaminating the rest of them, especially with our violence. You have to get rid of the violence. But they said you wouldn't think it would be that important, but they said it is. Because if we were to blow up this one little tiny planet, it would send reverberations throughout the universe. Okay, so if it were to reverberate throughout the universe, it would affect many, many civilizations that we don't have any idea about. Now this is louder? Okay. It would affect many different civilizations. Also, it would affect civilizations in other dimensions, which most of you don't know about. There are thousands of dimensions all around us. What? What I do? Did I do something? Okay. There are thousands and thousands of dimensions all around us, and in these dimensions are other cities, other civilizations, other people. We can't see them because they're vibrating at a different frequency. Just like you watch a propeller blade or a fan, when it speeds up, it becomes invisible. That's because of the vibrations and the frequencies. So these other civilizations are there, and they said it would be like undeclared war on all these other civilizations everywhere. It could not be allowed to happen, and it could destroy the whole universe. If we ever got to that point where we could destroy the world, then they would have to step in. Otherwise, they just stand back and shake their heads and not able to do anything. Okay, so now you got the picture. They've been taking care of us all this time. Then it came to the end of World War II. We just come through this horrible war. So what did we do? We dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima. And I wrote a book about this. I did a lot of research into the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And when we did that, that got their attention. And they said, we better get down there and see what these kids are playing around with. Because everything we're given is supposed to be in the right timeline. You're not supposed to get anything until you're ready to handle it. We were not supposed to get atomic power yet. When it was supposed to have been given to us, it was supposed to have been used for good. And I said, well, we are using it for good. We're using it for electricity and things. They said, yes, but when it was first created, it was created as a weapon that put an aura around it that can never be erased, no matter how much good you try to do with it. It was not supposed to be used as a weapon. So they came down to find out what was going on. And those of you who know about the UFO community, the sightings began right at the end of World War II. They had the big flaps there, when all of a sudden everybody was seeing UFOs, and they were coming. This is why. They were coming to see what is Earth doing and trying to figure this out. Because they said, these kids can't even take care of their own lives. They don't know how to manage their own lives. They just came through this horrible war where they killed all these people, and now you give them something like this? They would never be able to handle atomic power. They knew if we had it, we were going to end up destroying the world. So what are they going to do? They're bound by the law of non-interference. They can't interfere in a developing society, even in a case like that. So they went back to the council and they said, what are we going to do now? They are coming so close that they could destroy the world and they haven't got a clue what they're doing. What are we going to do? They couldn't interfere. They came up with what I think is a brilliant solution. They said, all right, we can't interfere from the outside. Let's influence from the inside. And what they did, they sent out the call for volunteers. The ones on earth were so stuck in karma, going round and around and around on the wheel of karma, making the same mistakes over and over again for many, many lifetimes. And believe me, my clients are a good example. They go back 3 or 4 lifetimes making the same mistake again and again and again. We're caught on the wheel of karma. We don't know how to get off of it. So the ones on earth, those generations, were not going to be able to stop this. They were not going to be able to save the world. So what they wanted to do, they said, let's send out the call for volunteers, people who have never been to Earth before. It's going to take pure souls, souls full of love, to be able to do this. The ones that are not stuck in the wheel of karma and stuck in the muck and the mire, as I call it. They said it's like a fly caught on flypaper. It took so much for people to get out of that. It's going to have to be the ones who have never had lives on Earth, who are not stuck. So the call went out, who wants to volunteer and go and help the Earth? And you don't know how many clients I get now. This is why I began writing about it in the last 2 Convoluted books. I call it the 3 waves of volunteers. And when the call went out, and I've had these people go back to these lifetimes when they were first, they had meetings in the spirit side, they had meetings in the other places, said, who wants to go help Earth? And some of them say, I stupidly raised my hand and said, I'll go. Okay. But and a lot of times in the session, they'll say that. I said, well, what are you doing here? If you didn't want to be here, you liked it so well over there. They said, I heard the call. Earth was in trouble. I wanted to go help. I didn't realize how hard it was going to be. But in the past, remember I've been doing this a long, long time. My clients were all going back to past lives, working out karma. I guess it's been, I'm trying to think, at least 5, 6 years or more now. Instead of going back into past lives, the only ones that are doing it now are the ones who still have karma to work out, and those are the ones that are having problems in this life. Instead of doing that, they're going back somewhere else. Now I say, if you get people doing the same thing again and again and again, you know there's something to it. Many of them go back to lifetimes when they were ETs, on spaceships, on other planets. They were perfectly happy there because, it's just a being. Many of you have been ETs because it's just a soul going from body to body. This is just a suit of clothes, a costume you're wearing to play this part right now. This is just a play, remember. That's all it is. It's an illusion. It's a play. We get caught up in it. I've had people go to the other side after they've died and they look back and they said, it was just a play. I see all the actors on the stage. I see the actors in the wings getting ready to come on and play their parts. It was just a play. But I got so caught up in it. Over here, it was like a blink of an eye. But there it was so involved. Because people talk about ETs as though they're over here, alien. You have all been these. You've all lived on other planets. You've all lived in other dimensions. I've had people go to lifetimes where they were nothing but beings of light. They didn't even have bodies. Every kind imaginable that you could come up with. So these beings, they're just like you, a soul inhabiting that body. And they go back to where they're living on other planets, they're living in other dimensions, they're living on spaceships, and they're perfectly happy. But they heard the call. I'll go help. And then there are other ones who have never had anybody at all before. They go back to the source where we all came from. We all came from the source. We all came from God. They go back there and have never been away from it. Can you imagine how hard that is on some of these souls? What a shock it must be to come into this. This is the most challenging planet in the universe. You come here to learn emotions and limitations. It's a very hard place to be. They say it's the densest, heaviest, and they also said they really admire you when you take on the assignment to come to Earth because they know how hard it's going to be. Have to be very brave to decide to come to Earth. One of the requirements, to come to Earth is that you forget all about the other side. You forget about the spirit side. You forget about your plan you made. You forget about your contracts you made with other people because it's all taken away. It's done that for a reason. This is a school. It's a school where you can't skip a grade, but you can have to take a grade over again if you don't pass it the first time. They say you can take the same grade over and over and over and over again, which a lot of people do that come to see me. They don't care how long it takes you to pass one little part, one little lesson. You have eternity. Do you want to spend eternity working on one little part? Or do you want to move on and evolve so you can graduate eventually? That's what people don't understand. But when you come in, you make your plan, you make your contracts, you know what you're going to do, then the memory is taken away. And I've had a lot of my clients, they say, that's not fair. What did they do that for? I knew what I was going to do. Why did they take it all away? I asked them one time, wouldn't it be easier if we knew why we were here, if we knew our plan, if we knew our connection with other people? They said it wouldn't be a test if you knew the answers. So it has to all be taken away. So we're the only one in the universe where we come in, the slate wiped clean, trying to grope our way back. The only ones who forget about God and forget where we came from, forget all of those things, and we have to grope and find our way back all on our own. That's why they admire us so much. But look at the lessons we learned from doing it. And you did volunteer to be here, to go through all of this. But you get stuck on the wheel of karma, around and around and around, making the same stupid mistakes. And that's what I spend a lot of my time with, too, talking to people that, they don't understand how they're messing up their own lives. Okay, so now we have the volunteers coming in. Like I said, some of them came direct from God. I better go into that, too. What is God? I've written a whole section about it in one of my books. We all began with God, everybody. And people come and they'll say, I want to know where I came from. I said, we all came from the same place. I thought I had a home planet out there or something. Well, that may have been one of your stops along the way. But we all began with Source. We began with God. Before he sent all of us out on our journeys and to learn lessons. And they said, first thing you've got to understand is God is not a man. If anything, he would be a woman. Because women are the creative power. He's neither one. He has no sex. It is a huge, powerful energy. And I've had people see this. They go back there, and it is beautiful, and it's wonderful. And when they're back with the source, they don't want to leave. It is so beautiful. It's total love. They describe it as a huge, bright light. You're nodding. You've probably seen it in meditation, haven't you? The huge, bright light. Some people call it the great central sun. But they say, sometimes they'll say, I'm in the sun, but I'm not burning. It's just this huge light. They are all part of it. And it has so much love, they never want to leave. And they're all together. And that's how we all began. We were all together at one time. That's why a lot of people have this feeling of separateness when they do leave, because we were sent out to learn our lessons and to do the things we're supposed to do. And then in the end, when we graduate, the idea is to bring everything we have learned back to God and download it like to a gigantic computer. But these people who go back to these lifetimes, so here they are with God. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. They love the togetherness. They never want to leave. I said, okay, well, I know you left because I'm talking to this person laying on the bed here. I know you've left at one time. It was so beautiful. Why did you leave? I heard the call. They needed help. Earth needed help. So they were willing to separate from something so beautiful and come here. You see what a lot of these people have had such difficulty with? They're full of love, and they don't understand this world at all. And that's what I've found now, what I call the 3 waves of volunteers. And some of you probably have been hearing about this. I've been on the Coast to Coast show a lot. And when I'm on there, Amber started talking about the 3 waves, and there you talk all night long. Which my daughter says, I don't have any problem talking all night long. But when you're on there, after that, we got 3,000 emails a day. And I said, forget about it. If you've emailed me, forget about trying to answer these emails. I read them, but it's impossible. But it was hitting home to so many people. Now the YouTube is doing the same thing. The things I've done on there, they email and say, finally, something makes sense. I thought I was all alone out there. I thought there was nobody in the world that felt like I did. They said, I'm first wave. They would say, I'm second wave. They're identifying with it. And they said, finally, now it makes sense. And I put this together through all of this work, is how the waves are identified. My daughter says she thinks I'm putting dates on it. I shouldn't, because it may be overlapping in different ways. But the first wave, we think probably were born right at the end of World War II, the first ones to come in, whenever they said Earth needs help. And we were saying upper 50s in their age, but I get emails from people saying, I think I'm first wave and I'm in my early 60s. Well, now that would make sense according to the age. The first wave had it the most difficult. They had it the hardest. The book Keepers of the Garden was the first time I ever encountered anybody like that, and I had no idea what it was. It was just somebody who had never lived on Earth before. But now I get it through so many people. But it began back then, and I was getting the first hints of this. Now, the first wave, they don't want to be here. They don't like Earth. You got to remember, they don't know none of this consciously, just like none of you know. You don't remember your contracts. You don't remember your plan. They don't want to be here. They don't like it here. They especially don't like the violence. They don't understand emotions. Emotions frighten them. They can't understand. They said the anger, they cry easily because they don't understand the emotions of people. They don't like the violence. How can people do these things to other people? And all they say, always saying, I want to go home. I don't know where home is, but it's not here. And I got emails where people would say, I can remember being a little kid, 4 or 5 years old, standing in the kitchen talking to my mother and saying, I want to go home. And they said, but you are home, honey. And she said, no, it's not. This is not home. They have that yearning. They know it's something. Well, the first wave have also tried to commit suicide. Many of them fall into that category. In the book Keepers of the Garden, he tried. They have good families. They have good jobs. There's no reason not to stay here, but they just don't want to be here. They don't like it. So many of them have tried to commit suicide. This is the first wave. The second wave had it easier. Julie, Julie, I don't know if she wants to come in here yet or not, because I usually, she helps me a lot with this because she has a lot of input. How many of you listen to my radio show on VBS? We got an email the other day from Portugal. They are listening to this all over the world. And this one from Portugal said, I hear another voice on there. There's somebody else there talking with you when you're on the air. And who is that other person? It's her. 'Cause I got tired. I've been at radio show for 5 years now. I got tired of talking to the wall. It's done in my front room. We're talking on the phone, and I kept thinking, is there anybody out there listening? And they say they are listening. But after about the last year, I said, will you come on and just, cross talk with me, and it'll help a lot. And so she's the one, she's the other person that's on the air with me anyway. Okay, but I was talking about the second wave. We try to figure out when did they start. Like I said, they're in their 30s or the 40s, 20s and 30s. They came after the first wave. And they had it easier. These ages is what I'm always having trouble with.
More by description.
Yeah.
They're all through there. So.
Okay, you can sit here if you want because we'll get to this other part where you're going to have to chime in anyway. She has a part to play in all of this. Okay. The, what? Oh, well, not right now.
Yeah, it's not my turn yet.
Not yet.
I do have a turn.
She will. She'll have a turn. But, well, we'll see, there's a lapovers too. How old would they be in their 30s now? 80s, somewhere in there. Some of them are a little older than that.
76, 75.
Okay, the second wave that came in had it easier. They didn't feel that feeling of wanting to go home. They have that, but it's not as strong as it was with the first wave. And let's see, I'm trying to think whether the other things about it. They're quiet people. A lot of them work at home. They don't want to be around people. They don't want children because, remember, the first wave is the same way too. A lot of them don't want children because children create karma. And when these waves come in, the volunteers have like a sheath, a covering put over them so they will not accumulate karma. They don't want to be stuck here. So they come in and, where's I going with that? They don't want children because children create karma. They want to do their job, get out of here. Go back. They don't want to have karma where they got to come back again and again and again. So this groups especially don't want children. I've had some that have married. And in the book I talk about where we found a husband and a wife. They were both first timers. And we didn't know it. And they're lucky to find each other. But a lot of them want to work out of their home. They don't want to be around people. But they're quieter. They're very gentle people. But the irony of this is they're supposed to be working with people. The second wave are like generators, channels of energy. Their job is just to be. They're supposed to have the energy come in and radiate it out to everyone they meet. They said they could walk through a mall or a store and their energy will affect everybody in that place. That's how powerful the energy is. They don't know they're doing this. But that's what they're supposed to do is just be. They don't have to do anything. And I had a young man who wanted to know, they always want to know, what's my purpose? What am I supposed to be here? What am I supposed to be doing? I call it the eternal question. And with him, he was second wave. And it said, you don't have to do anything, just be. And let your energy affect everyone else. Because after he woke up, he said, well, I want to do something. But it's like they're generating an energy. But the irony of this is they're supposed to be affecting other people, but they don't like people. So they stay home and want to stay away from people. They work out of their home. They're not doing what they're supposed to be doing because it doesn't feel right to them. But the second wave had it a lot easier. And I asked them one time, why did the first wave have it so much harder? They said, because somebody had to be the trailblazer. Somebody had to be the pioneer. Somebody had to be the ones to start it all. Then the second wave followed in their footsteps, so they didn't have it as hard. That's the reason why the second wave had it easier than the first wave. But the third wave are the children, and they are the hope of the world. They're the ones that are coming in. You see, as we're going through all these changes now, maybe I called you in a little too soon, but there's so much I'm trying to talk about. I don't know. I may have to skip a lot of it out. We're going through all these changes and vibrations and things as we move into the new earth, and our vibrations and frequencies are changing as the earth itself is changing. So as these things are happening, I hate that when I lose my thought. Okay. As these things are happening, the DNA of everyone on the planet Earth is being changed, is being adjusted so that we can adapt to the change. So the children are coming in with the DNA already in place. We have to catch up in order to do this. But the new children, they said the worst thing you can do to these kids is put them on Ritalin. There's nothing wrong with these kids. They are just more advanced. They are bored is all it is. I don't know if you saw it. Did you see on the Today Show just a few weeks ago, and we talked about it on the air, where they came in and announced, the scientists and doctors have announced 100 million children were diagnosed for that misdiagnosed with ADHD. 100 million children misdiagnosed and put on medication when there wasn't anything wrong with them. And the psychiatrists are finally beginning to realize, they said, how could something have increased so much in 20 years without somebody realizing there was something else going on? So now they're realizing there was a big mistake. They shouldn't have put these kids on it. And they said the same thing that I say, they're bored. And they said some of them are being sent to school too young. You're used to running around, having a good time. Now you're going to sit in a chair in a school. They're not used to that, and so they can't take it. They're bored. Besides, they learn extremely fast. I spoke at conferences about the new children where they're trying to educate the educators, and they had panels of these kids. And they said, we know this stuff already. The teacher will ask them for an answer to a problem, maybe a math problem. They give them the answer. Teacher says, how did you find the answer? They knew it. That's not good enough for the teacher. Or they will say, why do they have to keep going over and over the same thing again and again and again? I got it the first time. So they're bored. That's all it is, and that's why they act out. They don't need to be put on medication anyway. But the advice that I was given to tell people was, the teachers and the parents, give these kids a challenge. Give them in school, they can give them an extra assignment to do. Or the younger ones, if nothing else, give them something to tear apart and put back together again. Just something to keep them occupied is all you have to do. Don't put them on this other stuff, because these are the ones that are coming in are the most advanced of all. They're the hope of the world. And our company has published a book. It's called Children of the Stars. It's like the care and feeding of the special children. And it talks about their traits and how to handle these kids, how the teachers should handle them, and how to deal with the new kids. And it's a beautiful book. So those are the three waves of people. So a lot of people now are saying they fall into one of those three waves, and it begins to finally make sense. They aren't the oddball. They aren't different. It's just the average person doesn't understand them. The average person is the one that's caught on the wheel of karma. They're going round and around and around and still working out all this stuff for hundreds and hundreds of years. Naturally, they're not going to understand each other. It's a whole different thing. Does this stuff kind of make sense to you? Okay. Now, they're here to help because their purity and not having karma and not having dealt with all of this is going to help as we go through these changes right now. And the entire earth is shifting into another dimension and another frequency. And this is the most important time in the history of earth. You got to remember, earth is a living being. It is getting ready to go into its next incarnation. It doesn't care if it takes us with it or not. It is evolving into its next stage of growth. It would be just as happy if we didn't go with it. Because look what we're doing to this beautiful planet. They said we're like fleas on a dog. They just as soon us not go with them. But if we do want to go, then we have to evolve. Our vibrations and frequencies have also got to change in order to move with the earth, because it is moving. It's shifting and changing the vibrations and the frequencies. Our vibration and frequencies are also changing. You felt it today. We figured that was another jump that it did. They're changing to match the frequency of the earth as it shifts. So they said for our frequency, and this began about 2003, because that's when I began first noticing the difference, and that's when they first started telling me. It was probably before that, but it became more noticeable at that time. Now, in order to move, you can't change the vibration and frequency of your body that quickly. It would destroy the body. It can't happen. It has to be done slowly in stages. And it's been happening since about 2003 is when it's the most noticeable. And the way it happens, I'm going to describe some of the symptoms. And as these happen, people notice them for a few days, and then it'll level off. Everything will be fine for maybe weeks or months, and all of a sudden it'll happen again. They go to the doctors can't find anything wrong with them. Of course, they got to put them on a pill anyway. But it's actually, all it is if people would understand what's happening to their bodies, they would realize it's a very natural thing. You have to change the vibration or you're not going to be able to go. Some of the symptoms are high blood pressure, heart palpitations. That's a big one that people come in and talk about, AFib and different heart palpitations, dizziness, depression, body aches and pains, some nausea, headaches. You may not get them all at once, but maybe in one day or two you may get several of these. The dizziness sometimes can last for a couple of days. And of course, the doctors are going to put you on high blood pressure medicine, or they're going to put you on medicine for your heart. And a lot of the heart medications cause the very thing that they're trying to eliminate. And the dizziness and the depression, too. People go through bouts of that. All this is your body is adjusting to a new frequency and vibration. If you can ride it out for a couple of days, it will even itself out. Then you know when it happens again, this is all it is. What we always tell them just to breathe. She said breathe.
Drink lots of water.
To know if you realize what's happening, just you write it out. It's not going to kill you. But you don't, the doctors are the ones that are going to scare you. I'm not saying don't go to the doctor, but I don't think it's going to help any if you understand what's really going on with your bodies. The older people are the ones who are feeling it the most. Now, if you can't change the vibration to match the vibration, you will leave the planet. because it can't adjust. Nothing wrong with that. You'll just watch from the other side, watch what's happening. But if you want to be here as we go through this, and this is the most wonderful time in the history we're going through right now. The things that are happening right now have never happened in the history of a universe before. That's why it's so important. And all the beings out there are watching to see, are we going to be able to pull it off? Because it's never happened before. It's the greatest show on earth. And I have asked them so many questions about what is it like? What's going to happen? They said, we can't tell you everything because we don't know. It has never happened before. So we're watching to see what's going to happen. But it's happening. There's no way you can get out of it. You're in the middle of it right now anyway. But the older people are the ones that have the more trouble with it. If they can adjust, it'll be okay. The younger ones, don't worry about it. They're already in place. It's the ones in the middle that you have this up and down adjusting, and they don't know what's happening to their bodies, and especially if they're going through first wave, second wave, I don't want to be here stuff and all of that. But maybe this helps some of you understand, because the emails we get, they say, finally, it makes sense. Okay, another thing you need to know, how many of you noticed your diet's changing? Because you have to get away from heavy meats. In order to move, you got to make the body lighter. And the heavy foods hold you to the earth. So you will notice your diet's changing. And they say the best food is live foods, as they call it. Live foods are fresh fruits and vegetables. That's the best foods to eat. Stay away from sweets and drink lots and lots of water. Well, it is kind of hard to stay away from sweets, but after a while, well, they said in one of my sessions, they said, oh, a donut now and every now and then isn't going to harm you, but it's not considered a food group. But they say drink lots and lots of water. The value of water is beyond belief, because there is one tiny thing in water that your body must have. And to do that, stay away from the meats because that's heavy, especially beef and pork. And they said some chicken and fish is okay, but to eat light food so that the body will be able to become lighter and lighter. And they said eventually you're going to notice returning more into a liquid diet. Have you noticed that? After I was on the radio, they had calls coming in and they said, I wondered why I was switching to smoothies, because we're going to be liquid diets. Now, when we go into the new earth, there's going to be a lot of changes also. And people keep saying, oh, when we go to the new earth, will I have to die to get there? No. It's happening now. You'll take this body with you when you first cross over. And then after you're there a while, it'll turn into a light body. And this is where we're all headed. But there's the two earths, the old earth and the new earth. I don't know if I'm getting ahead and people ask questions or not, but you've been following the whole story? The old earth and the new earth. The old earth is the world where all of the disasters are happening. The wars, the earthquakes, the tsunamis, the floods, the volcanic eruptions, and all the awful things people do to them. That's the old earth. The new earth is beautiful and wonderful, where you won't have these things. And the ones in the old earth, a lot of those are going to be the ones who are into the negativity. This is they know. And they said they will stay with what they have created, because they can't change their vibration instantly. They will stay with the world they have created as the two separate. this is where it gets hard to explain because they've tried the best they could. I said in books 1 and 2 and 3, we've got a lot of information on the new Earth, and we're still getting more information. And they try to explain it the best way they can as maybe as separating. But other people, you said you don't see it as a separation, really, of the two pulling apart, did you?
Well, I get more. Now it's an overlay pulling apart. So.
You want to give
Oh,
us?
is it my turn now?
Well, you can. Well, you bring it over here. Okay. Okay. Oh, well, let me tell them that one. Okay. I don't know if you know Annie Kirkwood, Rosemary's Message to the World. We used to do a lot of panels together. And at one of the panels, she said, we were talking about the earth changes and things. She said she was showing a vision of the earth. Then she saw the earth began to pull apart the way a cell does when it starts to divide. And as it began to pull apart, it suddenly broke into two earths. Over here, she heard them saying, "We did it, we did it, we did it." And over here, she heard them saying, "Poor thing, she died believing all that." So see, the one will not even be aware of the other. This goes along with the Bible in the book of Revelation, where they said the new heaven and the new earth, and they're talking about one is taken and one is left. That two people are working side by side and one is taken and one is left. Two people are sleeping together. That's in the book of Revelation. That's what it's talking about. All of a sudden, a whole new world is created over here. And after I did that lecture, this man came up to me and he said, "I've got to tell you what happened while you were talking about this in the lecture." He said, "Now, I'm a businessman. I don't have things like this happen, but I got to tell you what happened. As you were describing the two earths separating, all of a sudden," he said, "the auditorium disappeared and he was in outer space and he saw it happening. And he saw the two pulling us apart. And he said it was just like you described. And when he went home, on the computer, he made a computer model of one overlapping the other. The one on top was glowing. And he gave me permission to put it in book 2, I think it is. He said, just don't tell anybody where you got it from." Okay. So it's a very difficult concept to understand. And people come up to me afterwards and they say, "Well, what about my family? Are they going to go or stay or what?" Well, everybody has their own choice to make. You come in with your plan, you have your own choice. You can't make a choice for anybody else. They have to do their own choice. All you can do is, you don't know what path they're on. You don't know what they're supposed to be doing. They will decide on their own what it is they're supposed to do. And they said, don't try to change anybody. We're not out here to convert anyone. The ones who are going, you don't need to talk to because they know they're going. The ones who are so deep in the negativity, they're not going to go anyway because they can't change their vibration that quickly. They said it doesn't matter. They'll stay with the old earth. Eventually they'll get there. It just won't happen right away. It's the ones in the middle who don't really know what's going on. They're the ones you can drop some crumbs and tell them some of these things. But anyway, yeah, you were talking. We've had discussions about this separating. And okay, go ahead. Yeah, okay, go ahead. Is it on? Push it.
Is it on? Okay. And I just got some more information when you said that because you asked a question. Questions are super, 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 super important. And because she has never asked this question right in there, the information never came. So because she did that, you may not have even caught the question. But when she did that, they gave me some more information as to the whole process. So
in all of my work with hypnosis, you must ask the correct questions or you don't get the answer. Okay.
So in what I was shown, and I'm going to ask you to hold that, how this starts. Right now, these two worlds, these earths, are sitting, they're like superimposed on each other. Can everybody hear me? Okay.
Okay.
They're superimposed on each other. And so it's difficult to tell them apart right now because we see them both. And that's where you're going, yeah, but these things are happening here. That must mean I'm here. I'm in that world. Oh my gosh.
You see it on the news.
You know, and that's the reality, right? The reality is which one you choose to focus on. Okay? And they showed it to me one time. It was like, well, something happened. I don't remember what it was, but something happened. And then they said, well, you can look at it this way, or you can look at it this way. Each one is a different world. I'm like, yeah, but this one's over here happening. This is reality. Like, if that's what you want it to be, if you want it to be your reality, then it's your reality. Or this one is your reality. I'm like, oh, but wait a minute, that's awful simple. But that's how simple it is. It's this or it's this. Okay? So right now they're sitting on top of each other. And if you look at them and you can go, yeah, but it's on the news. It says it's real. Only if you want to make it your real. Okay?
Are we involved in the earthquake? Are we involved in the hurricane? It's not happening in our world right now. That's what she means. You hear about it, but it's not ours.
Well, and even if it is happening around you, are you making it your world? Okay? It might be happening around you, but there's a difference with it happening around you and it happening and you making it yours. Okay? Exactly. To you, like she said. Okay, so at first, they're sitting on top of each other, and it's a choice. And it's like, okay, it's like something happens, okay, I choose to look at it this way or this way. And then each time, it does this. Now, do you see what's happening? If anybody can see, it's like you're making a choice. Okay, that's the two worlds splitting. See? That's how simple it is. In reality, there are 6 billion people on the planet. We will have 6 billion splittings of Earths, okay? Everybody's going to do it in their own way. The other thing, what it just told me, is she's like,
what was the question?
The question was, I remember what the question was. Maybe it'll come in the answer.
Okay.
But it was about with, you said something about the earth being created over here. They don't really know how. It had to do with the how.
Okay.
But it's all about, we think it's this and then we change. We are the change as our consciousness changes. Because I kept thinking, you asked me if, I didn't see it as a splitting. You said something like that. We create the split by our consciousness. I always took it on as it's a raising of our consciousness. And so in that way, it's not really a splitting, but actually it's both. By us raising our consciousness, that creates the splitting. Okay, by those choices. Does that make sense? Okay, but that's exactly, and that's been the confusing part because we get it odd sometimes. She has her stuff that she's getting. I'm like, but I don't see it that way. And then like just now, it put it all together so that both are correct. Isn't that cool? Yeah. So anyway, it's all your choices.
It's complicated. It is very complicated.
Right. So it's always about your choice. And like I said, when I was talking, when they were giving that to me, and they gave it to me in a very simplistic nature, and I was like, man, that's so simple. And they said, that's how simple it is. It doesn't have to be complicated. It's very simple. And that's why I said, well, that's awful Pollyanna to go, well, that one's not real. This is the one I want. And they're like, it's your choice. Which one do you choose? And that takes a little while to get in there. It's like, it's a choice. That one doesn't have to be the real one. That's the one we created to be it. So if you can create anything, create the simple one, the nice one. And I know some people go, oh, man, she is crazy. She's Pollyanna. She's off in her own little world. But that is how simple it is.
And you create your reality every day. Everything in your life you have put there. You create it. And if you don't like your life, change it. That's how easy it is. And I know because I deal with these all the time in my work. You created this mess, you can uncreate it. in your life because you put it there to learn a lesson from. If you've learned the lesson, it's time to let it go and move on to the next step. So
can I do that part now?
What part? Well,
Master creators.
Okay, you go ahead and do that.
It's a good spot for it. Because as she said earlier, this is the most difficult planet in the universe. Actually, there's a little bit more to that. This is the most difficult universe in all the universes. And this is the most difficult planet in this universe. Okay? That's designed that way. Okay, because this is a great game place. Okay, game field. Now, in order to
is a game anyway.
Right, in order to come here, okay, she talks about how this planet's over here, isolated for a reason, and makes it sound like the dredge of society. Oh my God, we're horrible things and stuff. Well, it is the most difficult. Only way you could get here, the only way you could gain passage to get on this planet, you had to be a master manifester. Now how do you feel? All right. You couldn't get here any other way. You were chosen, and you chose to be here because of the free will that she talked about. The free will enables, that's the game. This is all a game. We are super beings. Oh my God, I feel it when I stood up. We have power. And it's about remembering who you are and what we are. But we came here for that very reason. Because, I mean, think of it. Okay, you have a master game player. They do all these games on the internet all the time. They're always wanting more and more challenges, more and more things. What would be more challenging coming to the most difficult place in all of the universes and setting everything up, have free will, and then forget everything. Forget all the rules. Forget the whole shebang and try to, like she said, grope your way back to the light, back to where you came from. Now, is that a game? Yeah. That's a game only for masters. I mean, no novices. No way. They couldn't handle it. Exactly. Mm-hmm. So
they did say one of the most important lessons for you to learn when you come to Earth is how to manipulate energy. And everything is energy. So that means by manipulating energy, you learn to create. You can have anything you want. There are no limitations unless you put them there yourself. The power of your mind is tremendous. And that's what you have to learn as we go into this new Earth. And it's going to be beautiful. It's going to be wonderful.
Well, we're the ones creating it.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if we want to go to questions, but they did say there's two things you've got to know if you're going to go. Two things you have to get rid of. Go to the good side. Yeah, to go to the good side.
Whichever one you want.
If you're here today, I think it's a guarantee you're going to go. Because the ones that are into this negativity and all of that stuff, they wouldn't come here. They wouldn't even know about this. They wouldn't read about it. They wouldn't know because they're stuck in what they created. And they're deep, deep in karma.
Well, we're stuck in what we create, too.
Yes, we are.
Just we're conscious about it. Okay,
yeah, at least we know, we understand. Okay, the two things they said, if you're going to go, that you have to get rid of. One is karma. Karma keeps you locked on the wheel where you keep returning to Earth again and again because it is a law. It must be repaid. You don't get out of anything. So no matter what you think, you say, how did that person get away with that? They don't. If they don't repay it in this life, they'll do it in another life. But many of you have been stuck on the wheel of karma for how many lifetimes doing the same mistakes over and over again with the same people? That's the way it works. If you don't get it right this time, you got to come back with the same people again, do it again. That's the way the law of karma works. And you don't get out of it.
So, does first waivers, all first waivers have no karma? Or do they have karma? Are
I think that's going to depend. You'll know, I think, about, well, you know, karma. It can be good and bad. The bad karma is if you harm someone in another life or in this life, and or somebody has harmed you, and you have great resentment about it. This is the first thing I want to address, too, because this is what they said. You must get rid of karma if you're going to go, because otherwise you're tied to the old earth. You're tied to the wheel of karma that can only be worked on out on the old earth. So what? You had a horrible childhood. Your parents were terrible to you. And believe me, I get cases like this so much, where the horrible things that were done to children you wouldn't believe. They have horrible childhoods. Well, they carry that into their adulthood, and they're miserable. So what if your parents were terrible to you? So what if you had a husband that beat you, who was an alcoholic, or you had a wife that ran around on you? You got to let it go. That's what they mean. You've got to forgive it and let it go. Otherwise, that karma will draw you back again the next time with the same people, same circumstances, only next time it'll even be harder. Is that what you want? A lot of people say, no, I want them out of my life. And I said, well, then you better get rid of it now. And it's not easy. I didn't say it was easy. But the first thing you have to do is forgive. Release it and let it go. It doesn't matter anymore. A lot of the people that come to me with illnesses and all kinds of diseases goes back to this junk I call the baggage and the garbage they're carrying around with them. That's what makes you sick. You've got to release it. You've got to let it go. It doesn't matter anymore. That's very hard. Some people say, how can I do that? How can I forgive them? You don't know what they did to me. But who is that harming? That's where you have to really do a lot of soul searching. That's why I spend hours with my clients. We have to go over and over this. But they said, well, I've worked out a system that I think works. They've helped me with it. You have to forgive the other person. Now, it doesn't matter. You don't have to do it face to face. That is too difficult. And sometimes the person that you're still holding on to these awful things have died. So you do it mentally to that person. You picture them in your mind. And you say, we tried. We really tried. It didn't work. I'm tearing up the contract because you made a contract with that person. I'm tearing up the contract and throwing it away. And you see yourself doing that. And you say, I forgive you. I release you. I let you go. You go your way with love. I go my way. We don't have to be connected anymore at all. Yeah, the first one, though, is to forgive. Oh, yeah, she told me to repeat it. What I say, you picture that person in your mind, and you say, we tried. Because you know you did try. Sometimes it's been years of this. And if this person is still in your life, you haven't worked it out. That's why they're still there, because there's still karma to be repaid. But you say, we tried, we really tried, it didn't work. I'm tearing up the contract. And see yourself tearing up the contract and throwing it away. Then you say, I forgive you, I release you, I let you go. You go your way with love, I go my way. We don't have to be connected anymore at all. Then I was saying about, you know how people do? They love to push buttons. These are the ones in your life you have like that. They know what to say and do to push your buttons. Once you do this and you release them, it doesn't work anymore. They might try for a while, but once you let them go, they can't affect you anymore. Then they get bored and they stop at trying. And then they're out of your life. Another thing, you got to forgive yourself, which is not easy. Remember, it always takes two people. You forgive yourself for anything that you might have done and release that. But you've got to get rid of karma if you're going to move on. That's the garbage and the baggage that holds you to the old earth and the wheel of karma. Now you got that straight? The second thing they said you have to get rid of is fear. Fear is the strongest emotion a human has. And you know there's all kinds of things out there who want to keep you in fear. Don't buy into it. The TV, the movies, the newspapers, all based on fear. The church, everything is fear. The government is fear. Don't buy into it. Think for yourself. When you see it on TV, start asking questions. Why are they saying that? Why are they doing that? What are they trying to do? Think for yourself. They said, don't buy into fear, because that holds you back. Those are the two main things. So it sounds easy, but that's what it is. It's not easy, really. Okay, we got a time for a few questions. I think you told most of yours, but the most important part was this choice thing. But does this kind of all fall together? Because we're going into a remarkable time right now, and we all want to go with it. Okay, back over here.
Well, I just think it's interesting that there are people that come to the earth to help. And so...
Because we couldn't do it by ourselves anymore.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So obviously there's some of us that are here to lift others up who are the denser energy than us. So it's not always the right thing to do. I'm gathering to cut yourself off from certain people. If you came here to help, then...
But sometimes it's gone past the point that you can't help them anymore. A lot of times in my sessions, they'll say, the contract is over, it's finished. It was over a long time ago, get out of it. A lot of it is mostly soul searching, isn't it? Sometimes it's just a habit. It's gone on for so long.
Yeah, actually, officially, karma is pretty much gone. Okay, and it is just habits that we're continuing to do. It's our thought patterns and being patterns. It's just what we think we're still playing that role. And as we realize, wait a minute, this is my choice, that's done. The contracts are done. Okay? Now I'm here and I'm choosing how I want to be and where I want to go. So,
because,
and in that choice.
Yeah, the only karma is if you're still playing the same record again and again. That we can get out of it. Yeah? Those are the children. The third wave. Well, they call them the indigo. Is not really a good name for them. They are, we call them the new kids on the block. Yeah, and that's that whole generation there. Okay, yes.
With regard to, you mentioned something earlier about the things that are going on as far as fear, the news, the media, and various forces. Do you see those as an act? Do you see the things that are holding us back as an active force? In other words, sort of as an actual manifestation of something that mankind calls evil, or is that simply something that comes from ignorance, i.e., the forgetfulness that we made as we came out, made our transition?
A lot of it is control. Not so much evil, because we've been told there is no evil, there is no good and bad. Everything is lessons and experiences. It's all energy. How is that energy used? We perceive it as good or bad or evil the way it is used, but it's just energy. And those that are stuck in that, that's the ones who are into the negativity part. But I think a lot of it is control, because they don't want people to get out and think for themselves. Does that kind of answer?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I always wondered about the nature of the error that they speak of in various things like they call it the fall in the Bible. I've always
No, the fall is something else. I'm trying to think. It's in one of my books we talk about the fall. That was when man came to earth and got stuck. Because in the early days, when the souls were first coming to earth and inhabiting the bodies, this was a playground. It was a lot of fun. They'd come here and have vacations. But then after they got more and more involved, they got stuck in creating karma. Then they had to keep coming back again and again once they got the karma to stay in that body. I think I've written about cases where they didn't mean to, but they got stuck. And that was what was called the fall, because it wasn't supposed to be that way. But there's a lot of things in the Bible that are not accurate. It's just like symbolism when you really get into it. Yeah. Okay. We've got a lot into the interpretations of that in my work, too. Okay, we got one back here.
I'm curious about some of your people's regressions. Do they ever have experiences of being an animal?
Oh, definitely. There's a whole section in Convoluted 3. Oh, my gosh. I've had them be everything you could possibly imagine, because we have to be everything before we're done. A human body is the last stage. You have to be it all. And I've had people be air. The ones I talked about, they were there. They were cleaning out the ammonia out of the air at the beginning of Earth. I've had a lot of people be rocks. And you think, what lesson could you possibly learn by being a rock? They say when they're a rock, they said, life is very slow. And during the session, I'll ask, well, what was the lesson of being a rock? They said, well, she thinks she has lack of freedom now. Imagine what it was like when she was a rock. She really had a lack of freedom. And I had one just the other day who went into the dirt. She was part of the dirt, of the tiniest particle of dirt. And she was watching. She said, boy, it's busy down here. She said, all the little bacteria and the worms and the bugs and everything else. But I've had them do all of these things. I've had them be worms. I've had them be all kinds of insects. I've had them be birds and animals. And when I get those kind of sessions, I want to know, what does that bug experience? What does the eagle experience? Because I have my curiosity. And I've written about that in Convoluted 3. And I had one that's going to go in the next book where the man was an ant. And it was very interesting life as an ant. Well, you know, when you die and you leave the body, you go to the other side. Well, the first thing they do is a life review of the life you have just left. It's a board over there, like a board of elders and masters and guides. They go over. Is it okay if I keep going a little bit? Okay. But you go before the board and they review the life you just left. Well, you did okay in this part. Now you're going to go back and do this part. So I know they have a life review. So the man has this life as an ant. And he dies and he goes to the other side and he's going to do a life review. And I'm thinking, what kind of a life review can an ant have? But they were telling him, yes, you did very good. You learned cooperation, working as a group. So there were definitely positive things. And now you're going to have to go back and learn something else. And all of that has a reason. They said they love lives as flowers, but a flower doesn't last very long. You know? So you have to be everything. You got to know what everything is before you're finished. Then you get to be people eventually. Once you become a human, you've got to be everything. This means rich and poor, male and female, many, many, many times. And some men get out, and I do lectures on life after death, and I say, no, wait a minute, I've always been a man. What would you learn if you were one sex for hundreds of lives? You wouldn't learn very much, would you? It has to be a balance. But you have to be male and female, you have to be rich and poor, have to live on every country in the world, every religion in the world, every nationality in the world, because how are you going to know what it's like if you haven't been there? And if you're prejudiced against anything, that's what you'll come back as the next time. Goes around, comes around. And I've had many cases like this, so I know it happens. But, oh yeah, many, many times. I tell my students, if somebody comes up with a life as a bug or a worm or a bird or anything, don't worry about it. Just go ahead and conduct it like a normal session because there's a reason for it. You've all been there, done that. Okay, he's got a question first. Okay.
What was your most memorable instant healing experience?
Memorable? There's too many to count. There was so much of it. We have many, many cancer cases that come to me, and they come from all over the world. And what this subconscious does, it isolates the tumor, and then it proceeds to dissolve it and absorb it and flush it out of the body safely. I've had many, many of those cases. We have had many cases where people were scheduled for back surgery, and they put the back together. You can even hear the bones popping and cracking on the tape when we give it to the person as they put it back together. We had one not too long ago that came to one of the classes that I just had reshaped her neck. They were going to operate on her neck and fuse the bones in her neck back together. And she went to a lifetime where she was hung and it broke her neck. So she didn't have to have it done. And she came to the class and she said, I've got to tell you what happened. And she was cured. But see, I don't do it. They do it. I'm the facilitator. I don't know. There's so many that we've had many, many with back problems. We've had Huntington's disease. We've had that just happened. Where did you hear that one? It's not even in a book yet. It's going in the next book. You were in the class, okay. I was thinking otherwise you wouldn't have heard of that because that just happened in San Diego this year. Well, we also have had one example that I give in the class is the tape where the woman's knees were put back together. She was ready to have knee replacements because the cartilage was completely gone in the knees. And they rebuilt the knees. They took the cartilage from somewhere. We don't know where, but they created cartilage where there wasn't any. That's why they said they can do anything. And I had a man with prostate cancer, and they said, we will send it back to the nothingness from which it came. And I asked in that case with the breast, I said, where are you getting this from? How can you do it? And they said, we can create anything we want to create. So it's amazing. This is a great power that we work with. And there's too many cases. They come to me all the time of the healing. Let her. You had the second one. Okay, then we got some more. Yeah.
I'm just wondering the relationship between past lives and multiple dimensions, parallel dimensions.
Well, that's all the same. Yeah, but I don't want to get too complicated usually for a lecture because the stuff we've gotten is very complicated, and this is in the Convoluted Universe book series. But yes, the other dimensions, the parallel lives, you're all living parallel lives at the same time. You can't know these things because if you were focused on them, it would be too much for your mind to handle. So you were just focused on this lifetime. But you're also experiencing multiple lifetimes in other dimensions. All the past lives, all the future lifetimes, everything is all happening at the same time. Okay, we got one back here and then one here. Yeah?
Earlier, you and I were talking about knowing someone that you said that you work with, that you've been, so I won't name names, right? There's somebody else that you work with. And I want to clarify what I believe, and that is that I had a tremendous past life karma with my husband.
Yeah.
Back in way back, many, long time ago.
It don't matter. Time is anyway.
And in that lifetime, I did something cruel to her. And I went through a regression type situation where asking forgiveness and being forgiven, then going back and experiencing myself as that magistrate and working on
What do you think? Is she still pushing your buttons? Okay.
That's how you know. Yeah, that's one of your best ways of knowing is that.
Yep. If you feel it is, if you believe it is. But see, when I work, the subconscious will tell you it's done. If there's no doubt about it at all. And if you feel it, she's not bothering you anymore, it's not pushing your buttons, you don't get you upset, well then it's done. There's no need for it anymore. That's where the understanding is the most important thing of why these things happen. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. People do horrible things to each other. I've done thousands and thousands of people. You wouldn't believe the sessions for the things people do to each other. It's amazing. We have one more back there, and then I think that's, or two more? One more question. Yeah, there was a man back there that had his hand up. Oh, here. I thought there was somebody back there. Okay, yeah.
We're talking about going through things third party. Where you're working and then somebody else is working through you.
They are working.
They're working through you.
Through the person, not through me.
Through the person. How do we contact them ourselves, first person?
Okay, because see, I do it by asking the questions, and they answer the questions through the person. And they're able to do the healing through the person. But you can do it yourself through meditation, and let her explain, because she works directly with them all the time. She's learned how to do it. That's why they talk to her all the time.
So here's talking to the higher self 101.
Okay.
Anybody can do this. Anybody, everybody can do this. This is just a nice, simple way. I mean, you get there. It is by third person, whatever you want to call it. And what's helpful about this is then you recognize it. So then later you could do it. It helps you to do it on your own later. But anybody can do it. It's just a matter of we really make things complicated. That's our human nature. They're actually trying. You're actually trying to communicate right now with yourself. This is you. Okay. First of all, don't make it this thing that's out here that's big and mystical and I have to beseech you and beg you to please talk to me. It's you. It's your higher self. It's you. Okay? Of course you want to talk to you. You have all the answers. You're the one that knows you, and you know what you want. Okay? Keep it simple. That's our first thing. We make things complicated. It's simple. It's us. And when I realized that, it was like, then that changed the whole thing for me. When I realized it was like I could hold hands with this. It made it very personable. Because it's me. Okay? It's not a stranger over there that doesn't really know me. It's me. All right, so first it's you, and it's already there. So it's just a matter of you acknowledging it and accepting it and allowing it. Okay, that's really all it is. Now, it's already doing it. You just don't hear it. Okay?
Unless it hits you on the head.
Yeah.
Believe me, it will if you don't listen.
It will. I've been there. So, I mean, I'm hard-headed. It took a lot to get through, but it finally did.
And it will hit you up the side of the head if you're not listening to the little clues.
Mm-hmm. So what you do is you'll notice little things. And it might be just something microscopic at first. It's okay. It really doesn't matter what it is. Acknowledge it. That's the first thing that opens the door is you acknowledge it. And then in that, and then you'll be questioning, well, I don't know if that was it or not. You'll get confirmation. I always got 3 confirmations within a day of acknowledging something. So then it was like, oh, okay. And what that started doing was that started building the trust in what it was. It would acknowledge. I'd get something that would either be verbatim stating whatever I heard, or it would be, some way it was confirming what I got. And it was like, oh, that must have been real then. Okay, so that's to help you develop your trust in it because it's already happening. You just don't trust it. And that's what blocks it, is you just don't trust it. So one is just allow it. It's already happening, so just allow it and accept it and trust it. And by doing that, it's a muscle. This is a muscle that you're exercising. So by doing that, it builds it, and it gets stronger and stronger and stronger. At first, it may just be, you can ask questions. Just ask questions of it. And I had to go through this whole thing. I think it's a natural part. It's a discerning part. Is this you or is this me? Is this real or is this my hopeful, wishful thinking? Because it sure sounds like something I'd really like to have happen or something, That's normal. And what I even did, I said, okay, they said, okay, well, when it's us, we'll be over here. You're going to hear us from over here. When it's you, you'll be, I think it was like right here. That was just so I could go, okay, that was just a thing I did. It may be normal, I don't know. But the main thing is just keep talking to it. Okay? And now I just have conversations, and it just comes through. I mean, we'll just talk, or sometimes if I'm just talking to you, sometimes it just slides on in, and it just comes through, or it's just constantly there. You can have dialogue with it. It gets from yes and no to full dialogue, and then you're just like, oh, I thought everybody could do this. Everybody can do it, actually. You think everybody does do it. They don't, but they can. So it's very, very simple. The thing is just know that you can do it. I think that's the biggest thing. So there, how was that for Higher Self 101?
And it takes practice like everything does, and then you learn to trust it. To learn to trust and believe what you're hearing. Like she said, you'll get verification and you'll know it's real. Okay, I think we've gone over time, and I think that should be about it. But there's a lot of more questions. I don't know but this
should be signing books out there at the table.
Okay.